So, Brad, back in the day when Gloria and I were living in England, we took a boat ride over to Dublin to go sightseeing.
Yeah.
And we're walking around Ireland, or Dublin. We're walking around Dublin specifically, not Ireland. We're walking around Dublin, and she goes, "Hey, the Guinness Brewery has a tour. You want to go do that?" And I was like, "Heck, yes, I do."
Yes.
At the time, I was working in a pub in London, and the English don't tip the way Americans do. Like, Americans would be like, it's a $5 drink, here's an extra $1 for you, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
The English tip like this. Yeah, I'll have a Guinness, and here's one for yourself, and they'll buy you a drink, right?
Oh.
But the shitty part, the truly shitty part, is you got to put the money in the till. That's the way they do it.
Yeah.
It's a terrible way of tipping. Like, I don't like it at all. So at the end of the night, I would end up with like 3 Guinnesses bought for me, right? Gloria would end up with like 48 drinks bought for her, and she would never drink them. So I'd be like, I'm having Gloria's drinks.
Yeah.
Anyway,
You couldn't
long
take
story
it in
short,
cash?
What's that?
You couldn't take it in cash?
You couldn't take the cash.
You
it
had
was
to
like,
drink your tips.
As an American, I was like, this feels borderline illegal. Like, you can't take the money that was literally given to me for... Anyway, long story short, I developed an incredibly high tolerance for Guinness over the course of the 6 to 8 months that I was working in this pub.
Yeah.
So I was like, yes, I would love to go on the Guinness brewery tour. At the time, it was like 10, 14, 16 pounds, something like that, right? And you got a tour of the Guinness brewery. But you also got, at the end of the tour, 2 pints of Guinness.
Oh, nice.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's a really lovely little beer garden, and you're sitting having a beer outside or inside, I don't remember what it was, and having a couple pints of Guinness. Anyway, we're sitting there. I'm drinking my 2 pints, and Gloria goes, I'm not really in the mood. Do you want one of my pints? And I goes, yes, I do. I would love one of your pints.
Of course.
So then I'm up to 3 pints, right? Then a mother comes up to me and goes, right, I'm so sorry to bother you. You look like wonderful folks from outside the country. I accidentally bought my boy the ticket that has the pints. And obviously he's 9. He's not going to drink them. Would you like my pints? And I go, God, yes, I'd love your pints. Now I'm up to 5 pints, right? Then this older woman, God bless her, with like a little walker, she comes up, she goes, oh, love, I'm so sorry, right? There's no way I'm going to have 2. I'll have the 1, but there's no way I'm going to have 2. Would you like one of my pints of Guinness? I don't know why I was such a mark for like, hey, that guy over there, he wants a lot of pints of Guinness. I must have had like the white American socks on, and they were like, there's a tourist. But so I ended up with her pint too, right?
Oh, my.
And I'm like, I had built, again, I had built up a tolerance to Guinness. Brad, I had not built up this much of a tolerance to Guinness within an hour.
Yeah. In an hour.
I had to stumble home, just barely trying to get back to my hotel. And Glow's like, well, so much for sightseeing in Dublin.
Yeah.
Slept the rest of the day. This was like 11 a.m. I slept the rest of the day in Dublin. Woke up at like 3 a.m. like, what? How did I get back to the hotel?
Yeah.
Gloria's like, you drank a bunch of free pints at the Guinness brewery.
You had a gallon of Guinness.
I literally just a bucket of Guinness down my gullet. I was like, well, that's what happened to me in the old Guinness brewery, Brad. So my advice to you, Brad, is next time you go to Dublin, put on your white socks and your baseball cap and just start going, golly gee, as you walk around. And you'll have a lot of kind Irish folks going, there's an American, here, have an extra pint. And you'll be in trouble in no time, my friend.
Yeah, and I don't have the resistance. I like a Guinness every now and again, but I can't I can't do that.
Also, drinking a Guinness is like eating a couple slices of bread.
Yeah.
So your stomach just feels like you've got a small love seat placed inside of it by the end of 6 or 7 pints.
It expands.
Yeah, it's not what you want.
Yeah.
So both a pro tip and a non-pro tip is wear the white socks, wear the baseball cap, but also try to cut it off at 5 or 6. That's my advice to you.
Good life advice, Dave.
And on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to ComicLab, the show about making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his white sock-wearing friend, Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon, and co-director of Strip.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. By the way, have you noticed that white socks are like the go-to for Americans, and how we're so predictably able to be spotted in a crowd when you're in Europe, for example?
Very much so. You just look. Usually when I'm walking around, I've got my head down anyway. But that's the first thing I notice is the socks.
Yeah. It's the socks and the baseball cap are like the go-to. My favorite though, when anytime I was ever traveling, was how Canadians make damn sure to sew the Canadian flag patch on their backpack because they're like, I might have a similar accent. I am not an American.
Not an American.
Do not start talking to me about American politics. I am not an American.
Oh yeah. So first thing you hear a Canadian say is not an American.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, listen, Dave, to start the show, I haven't really warned you about this. I've got a new segment for the show, and I've got a feeling it's going to be a recurring segment on ComicLab. You want to hear about it?
Okay. Yeah, go ahead and spring it on me. What is it?
It's called That's Why I Self-Publish. This is... We've got a little stinger.
And apparently we're doing it at Dodger Stadium.
Yes,
that's great.
Yes, we've got a little stinger. It's because I've noticed there's so many things that happen. I'll either read a news story or I'll read somebody doing a Twitter thread, and it's like, that's right there. That's why I self-publish. So this is for our inaugural segment of That's Why I Self-Publish. This I saw on November 18th from Cory Doctorow, which, by the way, Cory is like an important name in the prehistory of webcomics. He was one of the very, very first to do comics on the web back when I think it was like a CompuServe server or something. He goes all the way back to the very, very, very beginning of webcomics.
That's right. Yeah.
So Cory wrote about Alan Dean Foster, and I'm gonna be reading directly from Cory's Twitter thread. You can see that at Doctorow, DOCTOROW.
Can I tell you, this is one of those names that I've never heard said out loud. I have read that name a bajillion times.
Yeah.
Are you as far as you know, are you saying it right?
As far as I know, I'm taking my best guess.
I appreciate a man who's honest.
Yeah, I'm taking a stab at it.
So this might be a swing and a miss. We don't know. All right, here we go.
It could be a swing and a miss. Yes, also appropriate for Dodger Stadium. So,
hey, Brad, let me just slide this pint of Guinness across to you as you try to say that name.
Yeah, then I'll probably get it right by the third pint. So, quoting from this Twitter thread, Alan Dean Foster is a science fiction legend, a writer who produced a shelf of original novels, but also made a reputation novelizing movies and TV from Star Wars to Aliens, turning out books that transcended quickie adaptions, becoming beloved bestsellers in their own right. Disney now owns a bunch of these books thanks to their acquisition of Lucas and Fox, and these books continue to sell briskly. Disney not only isn't paying Foster for any royalties for these books, they're refusing to even issue him royalty statements. Disney has black-holed Foster's agents and lawyers, and also the SFWA, Science Fiction Writers of America. To the extent that they have communicated with him, they have espoused a radical, jaw-dropping copyright theory. This is Disney's theory. When they bought Lucas and Fox, they acquired the copyright licenses that enabled them to sell Foster's books, but not the liability, the legal obligation to pay him for his books. As SFWA President Mary Robinette says, this theory could absolutely upend the nature of copyright itself. Any publisher that wanted to go on making money from an author without paying them could simply sell the rights to a sister company which denies any obligations. Foster brought his case to SFWA's Grievance Committee, a group that has worked on my behalf in the past, says Cory. To be fair, Disney did offer to meet with Foster, but demanded that he sign an NDA prior to any negotiation. This is not normal. Sometimes the outcome of a negotiation is confidential, but you don't go into a negotiation under NDA. He goes on and gets into more and more detail, including the fact that Foster has cancer and his wife is ill and so forth. But when you read something like that, when you read the situation where you've got a publisher who says, "Oh yeah, we're happy to make money off this thing, but we don't owe you any royalties," when I read something like that, that's why I self-publish.
And the entire crowd of Dodger Stadium clapping along with you as self-published.
And by the way, we're going to do this every now and again. Probably won't be that long, hopefully, because that really got in deep in the weeds. But This is why Dave and I, week after week after week on this show, advocate self-publishing. Yes, it's more work. Yes, you take on a certain amount of things like I'm doing right now, shipping out my books for my Kickstarter.
Right.
Yes, you take on an awful lot of obligations that you wouldn't do under a publishing situation, but I am never going to get into a situation where somebody all of a sudden has the rights to my stuff, is making money out of it, but says, "Oh, we don't need to pay you." That's why that's why I'm a self-publisher today. That's why I was a self-publisher 20 years ago, and that's why I'll be a self-publisher 20 years from now.
Yeah, and for those that are perhaps younger cartoonists and might not know this, but Disney in particular, the whole House of Mouse has a bad reputation when it comes to just screwing over artists that are in their employ or in their licensing agreements or the like. Even as far back as when I was working for Mattel in the late 90s, some of the contract stuff that we had to deal with Disney, it's not great. So just be aware that like, oh yeah, it's kind of similar to the people that were like so excited to go work for Pixar. And then they get to Pixar and they're like, oh, this environment is not great, especially if I'm a woman. This is not the greatest environment.
Yeah.
So you just got to be aware that there are companies, and it's worth asking around before you excitedly jump in with both feet. That there are some companies in the art world that have done a really good job of marketing themselves as amazing places to work.
Yeah.
But then you talk to 5, 6, 7 artists and you're like, oh, maybe not so much, maybe not so great. And this is one of those situations where I am continually astounded because it is literally a rounding error for Disney to keep paying these licensing fees.
Yes, it is.
And this is such a bold move on their part, Brad. It's like taking over another company and yet saying we're going to take all their profits, but any bankruptcies or accounts payable they have, any debts that company owes that we took over, you know what? Shine that. We're not going to pay those, but we will take the profits in.
Yeah.
And so that's a version of what they're doing to this author, which is they are continuing to make money off of the goods sold, but not honoring the contract that produced those goods. You know,
allegedly, according to Cory Doctorow, and of course I'm going to say allegedly there because the other part of that is the side with the bigger lawyers wins, and Disney can put all kinds of money into lawyers that you and I can't.
Especially if this is a pattern that they want to establish. You know?
Yes. So it's money that amounts to a rounding error for them, but we could never hope to retain lawyers at that level. No. So they can just kill somebody with paperwork, just filing motions and all of this stuff. So yeah, it's a terrible, terrible situation. But again, but this is becoming a theme on the show too. This is nothing new. This has been going on for 20 years that we can see through webcomics. It goes on back through comics history, back into the 60s and before that. This is nothing new. No one gets to be surprised over this kind of situation.
Right.
No one. You don't get to play surprise anymore.
When you choose the path of saying, I don't want to wear all those hats. I just want to be the artist and turn it in and get my paycheck.
Yep.
A little bit, what you have to know is that this is one of the potential outcomes is the people that take that artwork and turn it into a paycheck a lot of times don't have your best interests involved, you know. And
absolutely.
And that is, again, that's one of the reasons why to Brad's Dodger Stadium theme song, that's why we choose to be self-publishers. Yep. And listen, I don't want to make a broad swath attack on Disney, too. I know a lot of people that very happily work at Disney, and I've been approached and actually thought about working on a certain thing with Disney. And there is a joy in owning and controlling your own path and your own future. And boy, do I have very few regrets in owning and controlling all my artwork, how it's being used, how I get paid for it, how I approach my artist, and whether or not I feel seedy about the way the art is being used, you know?
Yeah.
And so I have very, very few complaints about owning and controlling my own career. And frankly, Brad, I have come to find joy in all the aspects of self-publishing that I once dreaded, you know?
Yes.
The business aspects, there's a lot of creativity and joy in that. The publishing aspects and creating a book and figuring out how the book is going to be made, there's a lot of creativity in that. And so I like this new segment you sprung about why we're self-publishers. I think that this is yet again one of those examples of why we do it. And Gosh, I hope it works out for his family, especially given his health situation.
Yeah, and the fact that he's been creating things for years and years that they're publishing, it's. I got a feeling it's going to be a recurring theme on this show because it's so many times I've seen that. It's like, and I've had that thought. Well, yeah, that's why I self-publish, and it hit me just this week. You know what? That needs to be a segment on the show. That's why I self-publish.
Yeah, and maybe to put a button on this little thing. My hope for this situation in this specific moment is that it's very pandemic related, if you know what I mean, Brad. Like Disney as a corporation is still trying to incorporate an entire other company into its auspices in terms of swallowing up Fox.
Yeah.
And they're all trying to do it from an out of office perspective. And so sometimes communication slows down, sometimes it gets broken. My secret hope is that this is the kind of thing that will get fixed better when the pandemic is over and Disney's all back in the offices and everyone's communicating better. And frankly, someone who should have signed off on whatever this step was just didn't sign off about it because they didn't hear about it. So that's my hope for what the situation is, but we'll keep tracking on it and see where it ends up because hopefully it's not the other option, which is that Disney is trying to establish a new pattern of non-payment that, boy, would be dangerous for publishing.
If you listen to the SFWA, that's what they are afraid that Disney is trying to do, is establish this as a precedent.
And it's dangerous because it's worth tens of millions to existing and retired authors who are still taking paychecks for books that they did and should rightfully be getting years ago. You know, that
absolutely.
Kind of thing.
So listen, Dave, I've got an update as long as we're talking about past ComicLab features. I've got an update for you. If you remember, around February of this year, this was just earlier this year in February, we had a question, and I think we handled it in ProTips. I'll have to go back and look, but I think if you search through the February ProTips, you'll see this.
Can I pause you for a second? Can I pause you?
Yes.
What month is that you're saying?
February.
Say one more time.
February. Yes.
So you say the first R.
Not February, like
I say February.
February. February. There's an R there. February.
Well, it sounds like a Russian version of a Mr. Magoo when you include the R. February.
It's the correct pronunciation, not February. It's February.
So I'm not saying this in an attacking way because every time recently that I've attacked you, I get 40 emails saying, Brad is right. Dave learned the English language. Brad is right. So I know that there is an R there, but my assumption was always that it was a silent R, like the word knight of the round table. The K is silent. That R, you're actively making a choice to include that R. You're like, come on, R, here we go. We're Februarying
I've heard of the silent K. I've heard of a silent E. I've never heard of a silent R. Can you give me another example where there's a silent R?
Off the cuff? No. God, no. No. Well,
there's a silent W for Ren, but there's no silent R.
I can give you one fantastic example for a silent R, and that's the month of February, Brad.
Wrong.
There's that old silent W.
Silent W, yes.
All right, we'll keep going. I didn't mean to stop you. It's just, okay, so in that month of February.
You know what? Get into the habit. You'll find it comes very naturally. Back in February, I talked about somebody whose exclusive Patreon content, and this was not safe for work, was being scraped by somebody and then put up on a public server elsewhere that everybody could go and look at. In other words, they were doing this for a lot of Patreon creators, where where if you knew about the site, you could go and see a plethora of not safe for work Patreon content of all types, including audio and video and so on and so forth, animation, comics. And this person was like, what do I do about this? And if you remember, I had a lot of advice, including the Voldemort rule. In other words, never ever say the name of the server because you're just helping to give it light.
What was the name of that rule?
The Voldemort rule.
Oh, Voldemort rule. Okay,
from Harry Potter.
Yes. No, for some reason I thought you said Baltimore rule.
No,
I was what's wrong with Baltimore?
Because I said you never say the name because you never want to give them any publicity. And you can, of course, switch to charge up front, because then somebody's really got to think about how badly do they want to spend money to go
scrape off of you,
and scrape content. And you can do that. That's a very good thing. We've talked about charge up front back and forth for a while. And also filing a DMCA takedown notice. However, we noted that there could be problems with doxing involved with a DMCA takedown notice.
And also, if it's a privately held server, sometimes that DMCA is going to take forever. It's you're going to chase down.
And that was the case with this. They got in touch with the server, and the server couldn't care less. As long as those bills were being paid at the end of every month, then the server was just fine with it. But that's the rub. And so here's basically what I told this person on ProTips. I said, here's the problem. These people who do this, who think that they're going to create a server so everybody can see exclusive content for free, they've got a baked-in problem with their scheme. They want to collect exclusive content and place it in a place to be accessed for free. The problem with this is that it creates very large server costs. David, as you might imagine, the server cost for this gets larger and larger and larger.
Right.
And so these sites turn to their users for donations. Now, wait a minute. Let that sink in. They're turning to people who are using their site to get paywalled content for free and asking those people to pay.
Right.
Well,
that's like asking the cheapest friend in your friend group to pick up fries for everybody.
Right.
Yeah, good luck with that.
It's never going to happen. And meanwhile, those bills for the server just go up higher and higher. And eventually these sites tend to buckle under their own weight. After all, put yourself in the scraper's shoes. They're footing the bill month after month so that thousands of other people can have free content. For a few months, you see yourself as a revolutionary.
You're the hero, yeah.
Yeah. After a little while, you look in the mirror and see a schmuck. Okay? That's what I said back in February of 2020. And last week, the very server that we were talking about folded. Now,
what is that? An 8-month timeline, roughly, 9-month timeline. Pretty much what you said in terms of what the anticipated timeline would be.
Exactly. And so to bring this full circle, this person insisted that it had nothing to do with the server costs and said that instead it was simply a lack of the energy and motivation to continue serving a site this large with what little free time I have of late.
Yeah. And another hero goes down. Brad.
Another one bites the dust. But I want to leave you with this, and this is what I said originally during that ProTips episode as well, because I think it's the most important part of all of this, okay? And that's this. Somebody can only steal what you did yesterday, right? Your Patreon backers aren't in it for the archive, although that's an important component of the total reward package you're going to be offering on Patreon. Right. Rather, your Patreon backers are in it for the journey, to be part of the experience as it happens in real time. We build a community. It's why I don't tell people to say, support me on Patreon. It's not about support me on Patreon. I tell people, say, join us on Patreon. It's about us. It's about the community. A scraper can, and by the way, don't be fooled. This person's gone. There's going to be another one to take their place tomorrow. Okay? There's probably 3 more out there that I don't even know about yet. This problem does not go away, but these people can't steal what you did yesterday for the reason that I said very clearly. They can steal your content. They can never steal your community.
Right. And I think basically artists, as upset as we all rightfully are at it that someone's stealing our stuff, people underestimate how much your audience comes to you, not just to the art. Right. As you said, it is a community and you're building a community, but also these people do actively want to support you. And frankly, the kind of people that were going to go to a free scraper site were never going to support you anyway.
Never,
so
ever.
Keep in mind that that's probably going to fall apart, like Brad said, sometime within the next 9 to 12 months, especially as it gets quote unquote popular and that server gets big and expensive. If you keep in mind that it's going to fail anyway, the next one absolutely will rise from its ashes like the phoenix.
Yep.
But it'll be hard to find for the people that know Brad's work. Where did they go for this free scraper site? They don't know. It's a new one. It's hosted out of Bulgaria, and you got to search for it, and who knows.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, it's both hard to find, and we underestimate how much people come not only for the community, but to genuinely to support you. So even though we're not calling it out, support Brad on Patreon, people are appreciative of the work they're doing. And to Brad's point, it's not just the archives, it's what you're going to do months from now. What is Brad going to produce in February of 2021?
Yes. Oh, great things, I guarantee. But
I'm looking forward to February.
Keep going, you'll get it.
It's so weird. It's like having a big thing of gum in the side of your mouth.
February. Yeah, keep going. You'll get there.
I feel like I'm working in Siberia, and I've had a lot of vodka, and no, it's not good with February.
That's why whoever wrote those months did it right, because after February you get March. One syllable, a hard R, you can't screw it up.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. Well, Brad, today's Comic Lab is brought to you by the good folks over at Wacom at wacom.com, makers of the new Wacom One. $300 I noticed, by the way, right now.
Oh,
that new
really?
Wacom One. And I got to tell you, Brad and I could not be more excited about this as a sponsorship, because this is a product that we use literally every day in our studio.
Yeah.
And has made our careers possible for the last, 10, 15 years we've been using Wacoms?
Oh, absolutely.
So we could not more wholeheartedly endorse the Wacoms, and especially that new Wacom One at wacom.com. Thank you all for sponsoring the show.
Oh, yeah. We're super big fans. And it's one of those things that I know, using a Wacom, I can go back to when I first started using it. I'm a better artist with a Wacom than I am and with anything else. It just makes my stuff look better.
Brad, most every aspect of your life, you're a better friend, I've noticed.
Oh, yeah.
You're a better husband.
Wacom, I've been a better friend, a better member of my community.
A better lover. I think really it's
thank you.
Don't say thank you. Oh, that made it weird.
But yes, thank you to our friends at Wacom, wacom.com. Check it out. Sounds like they've got some special pricing for the holidays. I will tell you this, I don't know that you're going to spend better money than getting yourself a new Wacom One. Between the top-notch quality and the ability to easily carry it from place to place, it's a fantastic buy.
Absolutely.
Now, David, we've got a new question from a $5 Patreon backer, and I want to bounce this off of you. This comes in from our Patreon backer, Angela Boyle, who says, "Hello, you two."
Hello, you two. That sounds like the beginning of a sitcom. You two.
Yeah, it's like she's Mo Howard. All right, you two, straighten up. Yeah, we're not Dad and Brave or Brad and Dave or B&D. It's just hello, you two, which actually I kind of prefer. Hello, you two. So I don't have a lot of patrons, but I have had a Patreon for quite a while, and I don't want to take it down. I don't waste a huge amount of time on something bringing in a little income, but It is nice to do a little post about my thoughts on things. Do you guys have any suggestions on what to post publicly and what to make an exclusive so that there is something there for potential new patrons to see what they will be getting? I also have the 4 C's of social media right next to my desk. Thanks for the guidance, Angela. So, David, what do you think? How do you tell when to do a public Patreon post and when to do an exclusive post?
This is an interesting question, Bradley. So, for me, my default position is that if it's going to go on Patreon, for the most part, it's going to go private, right?
Yes.
That's my default position. These are people that are joining a community. They're supporting you. They want the exclusives, the sneak peeks, the inside scoops. Or the early reads, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for all those reasons, I try to make the Patreon exclusive to be truly exclusive.
Yeah.
And the rarer occasions where I do want to share it, to Angela's point, it is the sneak peek. It's the moment where I want to say, "Hey, you're missing out a little something, and here's a sweet taste on what you could be getting here on Patreon."
Mm-hmm.
And so the way I look at it, the ratio is not unlike a Costco wholesale, Brad. I'm going to tell you what I mean by that.
Okay.
Think about the full volume of what's in a Costco wholesale, all those SKUs, all those items, all those super high racks stacked so high.
Yeah.
But then every once in a while you round a corner and you're like, a sample of sausage, sir? Sample of sausage? Sir, a sausage sampler? And listen, I'm no dummy. I'm never going to turn down a sausage sampler. I'm going to have that sausage. But it's not like they're giving away the whole sausage rack. They're just giving a little sausage sample. I don't know why I got stuck on sausages. Give me all sausages.
You're getting hungry. No, and they're giving away little smoky links, not a lawnmower. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it, Brad.
Yeah.
They're not giving away a lawnmower to try for free and then it's yours to keep. They're giving away. By the way, it's like here's an ice cream sandwich. We're going to split that ice cream sandwich 48 ways and give it to you in a little paper cup. Right? That's what you're going to get at that ice cream sandwich. So it's just enough to get the flavor of it, the sense of it, the whispered hope of what you could get at a Costco without giving away the Costco, right?
Right. This is why, and this has come up in the last few shows, this is why I actually suggest to people starting out on their comic or in the early days or early years of their comic not to start a Patreon. Because Angela's finding herself in this situation where she's so confused about Patreon, she's confusing social media with Patreon. She think the types of posts that she's talking about are for social media. Those are social media posts. That's where you're building your audience. And now she's gotten in so far that she thinks she's got to do something for Patreon, even though she's not really prepared to do anything for Patreon. And as a result, she's posting things that really are more adept for social media over on Patreon.
Well, and remember, I think it's rule number 48 of Geiger's rules of independent cartooning, which is first comes the crowd, then comes the funding.
That's why they call it crowdfunding. If you're going to do my rules, you got to do them right.
Okay, did I do it wrong? Oh, I'm still stuck on February. So what? Tell me what did I do wrong?
The Geiger's Law is it's called crowdfunding. First comes the crowd, then comes the funding.
Oh, so
it's
I should have led with the word crowdfunding.
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
okay.
You got to do this right.
Okay, so it's like saying you got to lead with, if you're going to be pedantic, you can't spell pedantic without Brad Geiger, right? Is that what you're, okay.
Right.
So, but anyway, so if you're going to do crowdfunding, first comes the crowd, then comes the funding. And the reason I mention that is, to Brad's point, the kind of comments that you're trying to make, the kind of posts you're trying to make, those are the ones that would build your crowd, just to reinforce what Brad's saying, not extract funding from the crowd. Now, it's perfectly fine once you already have a Patreon to sprinkle those in. Absolutely. Neither Brad nor I would argue with that. But to your own admission, you probably launched the Patreon a little too soon, and that's okay. But some of these you might, if your heart is telling you this is more of a social media post than it is a Patreon post, then your heart is probably right, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And that you should be building the crowd with those public and free and welcoming posts, so that you can then get them in for the private post behind the paywall kind of thing.
Yeah, Dave, the upshot is this. Go back and read that question. Because, again, the answer sometimes is right there in the question that you ask. That last part is, do you guys have any suggestions on what to post publicly and what to make an exclusive post so there was something there for potential new patrons to see what they will be getting? Angela, from everything I'm reading, you're in no position to be getting new patron backers because you don't have anything to offer them so much, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Your focus at this point should not be on getting new Patreon backers because you're not really prepared for the Patreon backers that you have right now because you don't know what the hell to post for them. right?
Right.
So you should be focusing on the comic right now. Post, for sure, post early access to the comics that you're doing. Post stuff for those people that you got now. That's good. That's fine. And leave getting new Patreon backers for a little bit later when you can maneuver yourself into a situation that you can do something exclusive, or you have very large numbers of followers that you can have them do the support-based Patreon where they're just chipping in a couple bucks a month to keep you going because they like you. You can do that, but your numbers have to be big. You don't seem to be in either one of those categories yet. And you yourself are saying it's not a lot of income, so don't sweat it. Don't put that pressure on you. Again, just like I said, the big problem with starting Patreon too early is you put all this pressure on yourself that doesn't belong there. Your focus right now, if I'm reading this correctly, your focus should be on making the comic better right now, focusing on that comic. Don't worry so much about Patreon.
Well, I can put no finer button on it than that. I think Brad's right and put it better and more succinctly than I would. So, Brad, I'm going to jump us into our next question from No Far Spalt, who writes, "Hi, Brad and Dave. Could you please talk about how you manage repetitive tasks?
Yeah.
Do you have checklists or automated procedures that help you get through what at times may be mind-numbing work while making sure that you stay focused and don't forget something important?
Mm-hmm.
I've been listening to you guys' conversations since Webcomics Weekly, and they are still the highlight of my week."
Wow.
So, Brad, I want to ask you about your repetitive tasks. Do you have checklists or automated procedures for your repetitive tasks, the small things that you do every day, or maybe big projects that you do once every 6 months or once every 12 months?
Yeah, I listened to this podcast from NPR. You probably listen to it from time to time, called Hidden Brain. Mm-hmm. Very, very good. Talks about basically how we think, how we use our brains. And they did a really great segment one time that talked about the importance of the checklist.
Yes.
And what happened was, in this hospital, they started making surgeons and operating room technicians go through an actual physical checklist before they did certain things. The doctors all hated it because they're doctors, right? They're like, I'm a doctor. I don't need...
16 years I've been going to school for this. Yeah.
Right. I know what I'm doing. I don't need a checklist. And they said, trust us. Just do it. Do it and follow along. We're gonna keep track of the numbers. The mortality rate at that hospital dropped drastically because even though, like Dave and I, you've been doing this so long that you can do it. You feel like you can do it in your sleep. The importance of going through that checklist just to make sure that you've got everything lined up. You've got everything the way it's supposed to be. Always, always, always saves you from mistakes that inevitably happen when you don't. So I'm a big fan of the checklist. A checklist for repetitive tasks, checklists for big ticket items like your books and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Dave, don't you think for like a book run, you need a big checklist for that? Because there's a lot of moving parts, right?
So it's funny because both my wife and I are big fans of the list. As is probably evident from the episode where I had us do our 1, 3, and 5 year goals, I'm a big fan of writing out the steps that you want to take and the steps that you need to take. And for me, I have a running weekly task. In fact, I'll hold it up for you, Brad, right here. Mm-hmm. It's a page long. It's all the tasks that I have to do, and I segment it out. Here are the ones that I have to do for cartooning. Here are the ones that I have to do for business, and here are the ones that I have to do in my home life, right?
Yeah.
And the problem for me now as, I guess, a business owner who is also creative, who's also a dad, who's also a husband, who's also a son-in-law that has to help take care of elderly in-laws.
Yeah.
I have a lot of running tasks, and I famously have a bad memory. As Brad will attest, from the fact that I was late for this podcast recording, I have a bad memory. I will remember weird things about the Roman Empire. I won't remember things in my own personal life. It's weird. Yeah. I'm sort of book smart, world stupid in that regard. But for me, a checklist really makes life manageable in that it segments the things that I need to know into concrete, check-offable lists that I know that I've done the work and that the task is complete. And so for me, I have this weekly list, not leakly whist, that I check off. But then also for things like a book, Brad, I'm glad you mentioned that, because a book is done just sparingly enough that you can absolutely forget the key critical steps that you did 6 months prior or a year prior, that you're like, I'll never forget this. This is ingrained in my memory. I'm never going to make this mistake again. Cut to 12 months later when you're doing the next book. You're like, oh gosh, what was that mistake I made? Honest to God, those little checklists that I do, and I just save a little file in the book, the folder that I've just completed the book of, and in the folder of the book that has not yet been started, I will create a README file for everyone that knows a README file, and it'll just do the breakdown of the books. How about yourself, Brad?
Yeah, I do the same thing. And I will say, I'm like you. I like to do, this is one task I like to do analog rather than digital.
Yes.
Because sometimes with all this digital, to sound like an old man, it's too easy to miss stuff. It's too easy to move stuff around.
Well, you know what, too, Brad? Honestly, mentally it runs together.
Yeah.
An email that you write becomes the mental equivalent of the same list that you typed. You know. Whereas when you physically write something out, there's a slightly different physical mnemonic that happens that your hand remembers almost in a different part of your memory, the thing that you were trying to record.
Not only that, but even the best to-do list, you've got to go through all these steps. Okay, new item, select yes. Is this a recurring item? No. Press yes to go forward, type it out, put it in the thing. Now I've got to direct it over to the other thing.
Do you want to color code this?
Oh my God.
Do you want an alarm set for this?
Whereas if I just take a piece of paper out and start a list, this is this is the new list for this week. And just add stuff to the list, and then maybe put something over to the corner, draw an arrow in. You can do it so much more quickly. It makes more sense because it's the way your brain is formatting information, not the way the app thinks that you should be formatting information, which can be two different ways. Your brain works differently than the app, no matter how good that app is. So I like making lists by hand.
Yes. I'm also going to jump us into something else too.
Yeah.
In a number of Adobe programs, there are recorded actions that you can do where, let's say, for example, when I scan a physical Sheldon, and I bring it in as grayscale, have to clean it up, darken the black lines, separate out the black from the white so that I can color behind it, all that sort of stuff. I have all those written out in a file that I keep, right, in case something ever catastrophic happens and I don't draw for 6 months and then I have to go back to it. So I have it recorded down. But then I also have recorded Adobe Photoshop actions that I hit one key and it takes me through probably 2 minutes of Photoshop steps in literally seconds. And for 99% of the time, cleans up the comic fine, changes it to bitmap, then changes it back to grayscale and then to CMYK so I can color it. Bada bing, bada boom, and I'm done in seconds with one keystroke. Brad, do you have anything like that in your life?
Automate anything you can is what I say. Anything. I think there's a quote floating somewhere on the Discord server that says, anything you do more than once, automate. And I don't know who said it, but I agree with them. Automate as much as you can, even though it's something that you're like, oh, I don't want to take the time. Or you think, well, it's not going to save me that much time. I'm just going to do it. All those seconds, all those minutes that you're saving adds up. And that's things, and that's time that you get back to do other things, either in your comic or in your professional life or in your private life. That's just minutes that you get back with your family or yourself or whatever. So I'm a big fan of automation.
I think that's true. And especially with certain, I try to be great with my communication and my replies, but I've automated a fair amount of what would be considered repetitive tasks. When someone buys a book from me, when someone buys an original art, they get an automated email that fills in obvious information, but it sounds fun and personalized, but is automated, And of course, I'll follow up that with a very personalized Bonjoro. But even that process is automated. It automatically brings my original art purchases, my book purchases, my new Patreon backers that come in. It shunts it automatically to Bonjoro, and then they're queued up for me and ready to go. So I will wholeheartedly agree that anything that you can automate, anything that you can make a repetitive task into a simple 1 or 2 step process, go for it.
There's I think it's a Google Chrome add-on, or it's something that you use with Gmail. I believe it's called Smart Compose. It's very easy to install, but basically you can write a bunch of emails that they're the types of emails that you always are sending out, things that you end up responding to an awful lot. Instead of writing that same thing over and over and over again, I've got a whole bunch of those Patreon based and for webcomics.com and stuff like that, where I'm always answering. For some reason, there is a webcomics app that is for webcomics, right? And when people have problems with their app, they go to webcomics.com, hit the contact button, and write to me about the tokens that they spent and don't got. And it's like, I know I can see it immediately. Okay, you think I'm the webcomics app. I've got a pre-written thing that says, here's the deal. You got the wrong people. Here's what you got to do. I don't type that every time. I just automate that, bing, send it out, and I do what I need to do and get back to what I'm trying to do.
Well, and speaking of Gmail, one absolutely brilliant thing that I learned from Dan Peraro of Bizarro, the comic strip Peraro. Dan told me one time, he goes, I respond to all emails sent to me except for the hate mail. And then the hate mail gets a faux automated response that says, thanks so much for your fan mail. Gosh, I love getting kind words. I apologize that I don't have time to respond to every email. So it's a quick automated response to just tell you that I thank you for your fandom and keep reading and I'll keep making them. Flying Dan Peraro.
That's downright Midwestern nice at its finest.
No, I thought that was fantastic.
That's wonderful. Well, listen, that's a great place to tell you this. You've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my automated friend, Brad Geiger. The automated friend, that sounds terrible.
I'm automatically your friend.
The editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my good friend Dave Kellett, co-director of Stripped and cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
The ComicLab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net, and this episode was edited by our pal Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love ComicLab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. You may hear your review featured on a future episode like this one. This comes in from Rob V. Smith over on Apple Podcasts, who says, great show for creatives and shop talk. If you're someone who wants to laugh while learning about building, developing creative online business, try ComicLab. Brad and Dave are specially webcomics professionals, but as a software and video game professional, what they discuss applies to much, much more. Just one episode and you'll be champing at the bit for more.
That's fantastic. Wonderful. Thank you for that. And we really appreciate that because as we've said before, all the reviews over at Apple Podcasts are especially appreciated because it's really, for whatever reason, hard to climb that algorithm. But I think the positive ratings and reinforcements do a good job of helping us climb that algorithm. So I will say ComicLab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/ComicLab. So we'll go ahead and say that like Brad describing a month, patreon.com/February.
February.
Remember, everyone, the word February, as Brad has correctly taught us, is actually described as February.
That's like nails on a chalk skin.
On a chalk skin? What is chalk skin? Oh, now we got stuff for next week. Oh, God.
Nails on a blackboard.
Or chalk skin, as the case may be.